Hi everyone, welcome back to my page. In this small little masterclass, I wanted to discuss consent and understanding it from a different approach. One of the first videos that I posted that kind of blew up was me discussing consent and how there are so many different aspects of consent that need to be discussed outside of what the rudimentary sex ed usually teaches us. And so I really wanted to create a guide that had scripts that had specifics and different things that an individual can use. And it's not just like a vague feeling of be better at this. So, for a quick roadmap, first we're going to be discussing why this matters and where the usual sex ed advice falls short for autistic brains specifically. Then we're going to go through what consent signals actually look like, a comparison of assumption versus practice, some real scripts, some common pitfalls, and a toolkit you can start using today. I really hope you enjoy this, and let's get started. So, why does this matter? Brown, Lavoie, Vasily, and Weiss published a study in 2014 looking at sexual knowledge and victimization in autistic adults. What they found was that autistic adults reported meaningfully less sexual knowledge than non autistic adults and higher rates of sexual victimization. That's not a small gap, and it's not because autistic people are less capable. It's an access problem. If nobody ever taught you the specific concrete version of this information, you can't be expected to already know it. And then there's Hannah and Stagg's 2016 study on sex education experiences in autistic young adults. A recurring theme in what participants reported was that their sex ed just wasn't built for them. Think about what a typical sex ed covers: diagrams, biology, maybe an abstinence pledge. What it usually doesn't cover, though, is plain language scripts for asking and answering sensory considerations or actual practice saying no out loud in a low stakes way. So here's the reframe I want you to sit with for the rest of this presentation. This isn't a deficit story. It's not that autistic people are inherently worse at consent, it's that the way it's usually taught assumes a communication style that isn't yours. You don't need to be fixed. You need tools that match how you already communicate, and that's exactly what the rest of this is going to give you. I want to discuss some common barriers that comes with the usual advice when it comes to sex ed. So, first, just read the body language. This advice assumes reading body language is automatic. For a lot of autistic people, it isn't, and that's not a flaw, it's a different processing style. If you've ever felt like you missed a cue everyone else suddenly caught, I want to be really clear. That's a mismatch in the advice, not a personal feeling on your part. Second, masking. If you spent years smiling through discomfort so you don't cause a scene or seem difficult, that instinct doesn't switch off just because you're in an intimate moment. It can quickly kick in there too, which means a partner who's only watching your outward reaction might completely miss what's actually going on underneath. Third, alexithymia. That's the clinical term for difficulty identifying or naming an emotion in the moment. Your body might register discomfort before your brain finds the words for it. The delay is real and it's valid, even if the moment to say something out loud has technically already passed. That's worth repeating to a partner too. A delay no is still a real no. Lastly, freeze responses. A sensory or social shutdown can look like calm, quiet compliance from the outside when internally it's opposite of consent. This is exactly why checking in during an interaction, not just before it starts, matters so much. Here I've identified 6 signals worth knowing because none of them work in isolation. So, to begin with, words are the clearest signal you have. Yes, I want that is never too blunt, and saying plainly what you want beats hoping that the other person infers it. Body language, things like leaning in or a relaxed posture, is usually supporting information, but it's never the only check you should rely on. Someone can lean in out of nervousness just as easily as genuine interest, so treat it as a clue, not a verdict. Silence is never a yes. It's an unanswered question sitting there. The move is always to ask again out loud rather than assume the silence means agreement. Freezing is stillness that isn't relaxed, and it's a well documented trauma response, not an agreement. If someone goes still or quiet in a way that feels different from their normal relaxed state, that's your cue to stop and check in immediately. Enthusiasm is the difference between something feeling wanted versus merely tolerated. You're looking for a genuine yes, not just the absence of a no. If it feels flat, hesitant, or like someone's just going along with it, that real information is worth pausing on. And checking in, asking, is it still good out loud more than once if needed, is the single most reliable signal on this entire slide. It costs nothing and is the easiest habit to build into interaction, romantic or otherwise. If I had to pick, I would say that this is one of the most important slides of the PowerPoint. And so, if there's anything that you get from this that's worthwhile, I would say it is this slide specifically because this table basically is the whole deck compressed into one place. And I want to talk about it row by row. Eye contact. The assumption is that holding it signals comfort and avoiding it signals discomfort. In practice, plenty of people communicate ease without ever making eye contact. So the fix is simple ask instead of reading it. Body language. The assumption is you'll just know from posture and expression. What exactly works is naming what you observe out loud. Something like, you seem tense, are you okay? Naming it out loud removes the guesswork for both people. Silence. The assumption that no objection equals yes is one of the most common and most harmful defaults out there. Silence always gets a direct question, no matter how long you've been with somebody. One yes. The assumption that a single yes covers every future moment doesn't hold up, and it's actually inconsistent with how researchers who study consent, like Agno and Lan in their 2024 review on sexual incentive motivation, describe it. Consent is understood as something that's given and can be withdrawn moment to moment, not a permanent switch. Yesterday's yes doesn't cover today, so ask again even if it feels repetitive. And lastly, tone of voice. A flat tone doesn't automatically mean boredom, especially for people whose vocal tones don't track their internal state the way it might for others. Check the actual words being said, not the melody underneath them. When I try to explain consent, I think it's really helpful to picture it as not just a single signal, but four, right? And so these are signals that you work in combination with one another to kind of recognize and read the situation. So to begin with, spoken. The assumed version is something like, she didn't say stop, treating the absence of an objection as permission. The explicit version replaces that with an actual spoken specific yes. Body. The assumed version treats leaning in as an automatic permission. The explicit version names what's happening and gets it confirmed out loud. Context. The assumed version says, we're already dating, so it's fine, using relationship status as a stand in for consent. The explicit version treats every single time as its own separate ask. Timing. The assumed version says yes once means yes always. The explicit version checks again today, regardless of what was agreed to yesterday or last week. The pattern across all four categories is the same. Replace the guesswork with an actual check every category every time. That's the entire philosophy of this deck in one picture. Here are a couple different scripts that you can use in real life. So, for example, say you want to start something new. You could say, I want to try this with you. Can I blank, blank, blank? Tell me if you want to stop at any point. I mean that. Naming the specific act removes ambiguity about what's actually being asked, and explicitly inviting a stop removes the pressure to perform enthusiasm you don't feel. Next, if you want to check in midway, you could say something like, pausing for a second just to ask, still feeling good about this? Keep the delivery super low key. This is meant to be a quick check in, not a dramatic interruption to the mood, and normalizing that tone matters as much as the words themselves. Next, pausing or saying no. You could say, I need to stop for a minute. This isn't a no about you, I just need a pause. You don't owe anyone a full explanation in the moment. The reason can come later if and when you want to share it. Separating the pause from a personal rejection is doing a lot of work in just one sentence. And lastly, a script isn't unromantic. It's one less thing your brain has to improvise under pressure, which frees up much more of your attention for actually being present with the other person. Let's talk about some common pitfalls and a few different ways of reframing that perspective. So, silence is not yes. It's a question that hasn't been answered yet, so ask it out loud instead of counting the lack of an answer as one. Past consent isn't standing consent. Yesterday's yes doesn't automatically carry over to today, even in a long term relationship. Each time gets its own ask, and that's not a sign of distrust, it's just how consent actually works. A script isn't unromantic. Clear words are a form of care, not a mood killer, and rehearsed language can genuinely make you feel more present in the moment, not less, because you're not scrambling to invent the right words on the spot. And checking in twice is never too much. Asking again is a sign of respect, not distrust, and it hands the other person an easy, low pressure way to change their mind if they need to. Let's discuss four concrete tools you can start using. Pick a check in phrase ahead of time, something simple like still good, so neither of you have to improve or improvise one under pressure or in the moment itself. If talking in the moment feels too much, text it out first. Writing out what you want and don't want beforehand counts as a real, legitimate communication, not a lesser substitute for the in person version. Build in a pause signal, a word or gesture that means stop, with zero explanation required in the moment. You can always talk it through afterward if you want to, but the pause itself shouldn't require justification. And lastly, let's normalize the follow up question, asking, was that okay after something? Not just checking in during, keeps the door open for a delayed no. Remember what we said about alexithymia earlier. Sometimes the no shows up late and it's still a completely valid no. Last thing I want to say is that you're allowed to ask for exactly what helps you feel safe every single time, and it is not too much to ask. That includes asking more than once, asking in writing instead of out loud, and asking using whatever words actually fits the way that you talk, script or no script. All the research behind this deck is listed on screen in the APA format if you want to go and read the studies, and I genuinely encourage it because I feel like there's a lot of good information in them. And so, again, thank you so much for being here, being present during this presentation. I hope some of the things that I discussed could be helpful in your own lives, in your own experiences. And again, if you would like to have the PDF version of this, please just DM me. I'll send it to you right away. And thank you so much for just, again, being present and listening. And I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.